Now the Three Martini Lunch with Greg Corombos and Jim Geraghty.
And welcome, everyone, to the Thursday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. Along with Jim Geraghty of National Review, I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Good, bad, and crazy martinis for conservatives today, as usual. And Jim, we start with the good, as we expected. There's a fierce debate over the contents of the CIA report issued by Senate Democrats earlier in the week, for the most part along party lines, but there are some crossovers in both directions. Supporters, of course, saying that this is a report that shows a black eye on America, but we show we're still the envy of the world because we can admit our mistakes. Others, of course, saying this is a partisan report, and the evidence shows that these tactics did work to a large extent and helped us gather intelligence. On Wednesday at the White House briefing, Ed Henry of Fox News engaged Josh Earnest on the question of moral equivalency on how the administration can condemn the enhanced interrogation techniques but be fully embracing of drone strikes that kill not only suspected terrorists but innocent people sometimes as well.
So can you explain how the president believes that it's un-American to use these techniques, but it was okay to ramp up the drone policy and basically thousands of people around the world, innocent civilians, were killed? What's the moral equivalency there? How do you have moral authority when innocent civilians are killed by drones?
Well, I think that the difference here, Ed, is, and this is a stark difference in the way that the United States conducts our policy and the way that terrorists around the world conduct their policy.
But in the end, we've seen many cases around the world where U.S. drones have killed innocent civilians, despite those safeguards. Well, and so how do you have moral authority?
What I'm saying is that is a stark difference than the tactics that are employed by our enemies.
So, Jim, if you just swap out enhanced interrogation techniques for beheadings and car bombings carried out by our enemies, then yeah, you've got the moral high ground.
Greg, how many days until the Senate report on drone strikes? I was thinking about this, and maybe this is really worth a really legitimate discussion. And you and I are two guys who, I don't think it's, we're necessarily bragging. We like to think of ourselves as pretty patriotic guys. We love this country. We salute and support our men and women in uniform, their families, the entire support network. We generally think that, yes, the system makes mistakes. The national security state can sometimes go in ominous directions, as we saw in the NSA debate. But generally, we think the people who are in charge of protecting us are good people who do their best and sometimes have to make hard choices. If you want to read that report and say the things that were done to the people in the black sites and stuff like that were wrong, people I respect have been making that argument, that they're not consistent with American values, et cetera, et cetera. Those are not nice things to do to people, to get them to talk. All right, that's indisputable. The question is, at what point do you go past some level in which you feel like, no, even if you're trying to save American lives, you've crossed some line, you've done something that is completely immoral. Intelligent people can discuss that. Greg, when is it okay to kill children of terrorists? If they're just sitting there in some place in Yemen or Pakistan or Afghanistan, we're talking about two morally dubious things. I think dead children very much outweighs waterboarding.
Oh, definitely.
Right? I mean,
definitely.
Waterboarding, the guy, it eventually stops. It's a mean thing to do. It inflicts pain on someone, but at some point it stops. Once you've killed a kid, that child can't come back. That's a permanent consequence of your actions. And undoubtedly that causes blowback, and that's something that we undoubtedly think is not consistent with our, with how we like to think of ourselves as Americans. Although if you want to think about it, neither was the Dresden bombing. Or for that matter, neither was Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I mean, one of the reasons you try to avoid wars is you end up having to do things that are not consistent with the way you like to think of yourselves. And to have an intelligent discussion about this, we kind of have to acknowledge that war is never going to be this pure, clean, surgical strike. We only hit the bad guys. There's no collateral damage, and we never have to make any moral compromises. If every time you captured a terrorist, they spilled their guts and they told you every plan that was going on, without ever having to do mean things like waterboarding or these other interrogation techniques, life would be a lot easier. Unfortunately, we're dealing with fanatics who don't care if they die, which makes them particularly hard to motivate to get them to give the useful information. And as a result of that, I try to have a certain amount of humility when it comes to judging the people who are putting together this system on the fly right after 9/11. And what's fascinating is the Dianne Feinsteins of the world can't do that, and yet the Dianne Feinsteins of the world are perfectly okay with killing kids in drone strikes. And it just strikes me as just unbelievably morally inverted to find one. The only difference between the two is that one you can pin, largely on the Bush administration, and the other one is continued by the Obama administration. So it's just one more fantastic example of how to lots of people, literally almost anything, literally killing children is okay as long as it's done by a Democratic president. It's a theological, morally complicated opening good martini. Right?
It's certainly the case. Talk about your moral equivalency. Let's move on to the domestic side of that now. And, of course, today is D-Day in terms of Congress passing legislation to keep the government funding. Democrats and Republicans have hammered out this Cromnibus bill, continuing resolution / omnibus bill that pretty much everyone hates, but enough people are possibly going to hold their nose to keep the government funded. But there is now an effort to block this thing, and it's led by Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren. And she took to the Senate floor yesterday in strong opposition to a change about derivative investments as it relates to the Dodd-Frank bill. That is interesting in and of itself, but
that's her hill to die on.
It's her hill to die on, and but her logic here is fascinating. We're going to do this in two parts. Here's the first clip from Elizabeth Warren on the Senate floor on Wednesday.
No debate, no discussion. Republicans in the House of Representatives are threatening to shut down the government if they don't get a chance to repeal it.
So, Jim, the Republicans and Democrats have agreed on this. Elizabeth Warren wants to vote no, so if it doesn't pass, it's the Republicans' fault for not leaving things the way it was in Dodd-Frank.
I will vote no on a spending bill keeping the government open because Republicans want to shut down the government. That's what she's saying there. No, it's the other way around. How dare you fund the government the way, but not include the item that I want. We had lamented that in these government shutdowns, the media, inevitably blames Republicans. They always twist it. You may recall during the government shutdown, Republicans kept passing bills to keep the CDC going, to keep the National Institutes of Health going. Some portions of the government like, okay, fine, we'll pass that. The infamous question from Dana Bash, well, it could save just one life. Why would you, isn't it worth it? And Harry Reid said, why would we want to do that? And you thought this martini wasn't about killing people, right, Greg? This is the death and dismemberment edition of the 3 Martini Lunch. No, this is Elizabeth Warren at perhaps her most demagogic, about her most shamefully dishonest in this. And as you pointed out, really interesting that this is her hill to die on. This is the issue that she herself is willing to shut down the government over in order to stop the Cromnibus. It's interesting how many times the Democrats have stuck crap that they know would never pass in a straight vote into an omnibus bill. Now when Republicans do it, now it's not okay. Now it's bad, and now it's terrible, and she's willing to shut down the government over it. Greg, aren't you tired of these extremists like Elizabeth Warren, threatening to shut down the government?
Yeah, I'm also tired of the media. You look at the media explanation of this story. It's Elizabeth Warren fighting budget. Elizabeth Warren fighting to keep Dodd-Frank intact. It's never Elizabeth Warren threatens government shutdown.
Yeah, when she does it, it's out of principle.
Yes. Here's the other thing, though. This is also from her floor speech yesterday, and I find it especially delicious in light of the House testimony and controversy earlier this week over everything Jonathan Gruber said on those videos about Obamacare. Here's Elizabeth Warren's denunciation of those who are involved in this proposed change to Dodd-Frank.
Now, you'll hear a lot of folks say that the rule that will be repealed in the omnibus is technical and complicated, and you shouldn't worry about it because smart people who know more than you do about financial issues say that it's no big deal.
Sound familiar?
You're not supposed to think like that on financial issues, Elizabeth Warren said. Save that thinking for Obamacare. All of a sudden, she doesn't like experts. I'm tired of this demagoguery, anti-intellectualism in the Democratic Party. Yeah, there we go.
All right. And, folks, that's not the Crazy Martini. This is the Crazy Martini. This is the Fox News version of the story, but it's made the rounds a lot the last couple of days. The president of prestigious Smith College is red-faced and apologetic for telling students on campus that all lives matter. Kathleen McCartney wrote the phrase in the subject line of an email to students at the school. This is in reaction to the protests and concerns on campus about the Michael Brown situation, the Eric Garner situation, and students concerned about police unfairness towards black individuals. So here was her message. "We are united in our insistence that all lives matter," read the email, in which she made clear she was strongly behind the protests, writing that the grand jury decisions had led to a shared fury. We gather in vigil, we raise our voices in protest. But soon she received backlash from students for her phrasing. They were offended that she did not stick with the slogan, Black Lives Matter. The Daily Hampshire Gazette, which first covered the story, quoted one Smith sophomore as saying it felt like she was invalidating the experience of black lives. In response to the student backlash, McCartney apologized in another campus-wide email saying she had made a mistake despite my best intentions. She says, quote, I regret that I was unaware that the phrase /hashtag All Lives Matter has been used by some to draw attention away from the focus on institutional violence against black people. So, Jim, All Lives Matter, shame on you.
There's a lot of to shake your head at in this story. One being the lefties' furious reaction to a message that is almost exactly what they wanted to hear. If she had said something that said, rioting is wrong, or the black community needs to be more understanding of, like you could at least even see why they'd objected. Here in this case, she literally used the wrong slogan, and they're jumping down her throat or something. But I'm really disappointed in this university president, and I got to observe, how weak do you have to be for you to not say, oh, get over it? We know the lefties are never going to listen to us. We're all terrible racists and knuckle dragging, ignorant, yada, yada, yada. This university president could conceivably have some pull with them, that she has the ability, that they might listen to her. They might not. Maybe they don't want to listen to anybody. Her job is to be the grown-up. Her job is to be the responsible, mature one. And if her students are behaving in this kind of quasi-fascistic toe the party line or we will denounce you mentality, it's her job to stand up to that. And if people are going crazy over a subject line in an email, part of her role as an educator is to say, you know what, folks, this is not worth getting upset about, particularly when the entire message is about how much I stand with you. And if you guys are, you guys have become now kind of like paranoid schizophrenics, looking and seeing enemies and villains all around you. And that is not an environment conducive to learning. It's not an environment conducive to intellectual inquiry. If you're not going to do that, what are you there for as a university president? But I guess you could ask that about a lot of university presidents these days, huh, Greg?
I think so. I guess all finals will be delayed there, too.
I got to admit, if I had a chance to delay my finals, I might do the same thing. I think some of these protests are overwrought, but if I can get out of doing work, whoa. All right, now you've found a cause I can stand with in pride. Or specifically, I can be active by not showing up. When Woody Allen says, 90% of life is showing up? I guess this is that other 10%.
Fun, crazy times. Jim, welcome back. Talk to you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Geraghty of National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks for being with us today, and be sure to join us on Friday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.